We are getting close, though, possibly, depending on who it is. We're about halfway there to a real decision on Mississippi State baseball's coaching search. Again, depending. If it's Wes Johnson and he goes to Omaha, well, we're not halfway there yet. But depending on the candidate, we're about halfway there. Haydad Hot Board 2.0 came out last week, so we'll start there. Have you made any amendments, additions, removals from the last Haydad Hot Board?
I have not.
And refresh the people's memory of who was on it.
I got to refresh my own memory on it.
Well, one of them was Brian O'Connor, for sure.
Brian O'Connor, Wes Johnson, Butch Thompson. I don't think I had Tom Walter on there at that point.
You did not. But you threw him out there as like, I mean, that's the floor.
It might have still been Elander, and honestly, he might be off at this point. I really don't think State's going nobody believes State's going the assistant route at this point. And if they do go it would probably be Parker at this point. And I take that back. Take that back. If they went an assistant, I think Coggin has gotten ahead of Elander. But I don't think they're going to go assistant. We talked a little bit on Thunder and Lightning about some of the guys who we haven't talked that much about. Butch Thompson is one of them. I think there's mutual interest. And again, I feel like I always preface mutual interest doesn't mean anything.
It means something, just not what people interpret that to mean.
A lot of people see your mutual interest and they're like, well, he's going to take the job. No, that's not what it means. Buyout's not an issue with Butch. It's just, do you want to, I mean, it's just that does he want to leave Auburn? Where, if we make jokes, but with John Cohen there, baseball will get priority. It will get resources. And, of course, Mississippi State fans have sort of viewed Butch from the prism of maybe that's kind of a lazy hire, and I just look at it as Auburn is the number 2 team in the nation. If I told you Mississippi State football was hiring the coach of the number 2 team, who finished number 2 last year? Who lost? Who was Notre Dame, right? If I told you Mississippi State football was hiring Marcus Freeman, I think we'd all be pretty excited. So, yeah, Butch Thompson's a great coach and would do really, really well in Starkville. A name that we was on some early hot boards, not mine, but others, is Mark Wazowski, the coach at Oregon. Oregon up to number 5 in the country right now. So I'm telling you, there's a couple of guys that are connected to this job that are, Georgia was in the top 2 last week before they lost, and then you've got Wazowski at Oregon. He was a periphery candidate in 2018. He was just so young into his coaching career. He'd only done a couple seasons at Purdue at that point, but he's taken Oregon and turned that into a really, really good program. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily put him on the hot board, but he and Chris Pollard, to me, are the guys that if you swing really big on Johnson and O'Connor and you strike out, you can fall back to those 2 plus Tom Walter and probably get your coach out of that grouping.
Walter's your floor.
It really does feel like Tom Walter is the absolute floor for this search right now, that he would take the job if offered.
Man, so a few weeks ago when we brought up Butch, right when the firing happened, that wasn't the most popular initial response from people. Mm-hmm. Not that a few weeks of good play should change your mind, but if you look at his record at Auburn and what his team is currently, that would be great. He would be great. And also, this is not why you hire people, but to kind of stick one back to Auburn would also be a nice little side thing.
There is that as well, obviously.
That would be a nice treat. But so now the question becomes about Justin Parker. Not because he beat Ole Miss. If you replaced Ole Miss with Florida this weekend and they won another series, that I would still bring this up to you. If the Ole Miss series was back in March as opposed to May, still would ask the question. They sweep Kentucky, get a midweek win another weekend against a ranked team.
They're 7. I'm sorry. They're 4, 6. They're 6-1 since
6-1. Yeah. And also, again, this is not necessarily why you hire and fire. He's impressive when you listen to him talk.
That's what he's talking about, yeah.
He's very impressive. And you can see how he would be able to raise money, which is important to pay the players. He would be very good in those rooms with the wealthy people to get money to pay players. He would definitely do well there. And, by the way, he's really good at coaching the game. Where, after the success that he's had since he's taken over, does he factor into this, or yet does he factor at all?
He doesn't really factor. I don't think he would have to go deep into the postseason. I don't know that I would say win a national title. Maybe though, because it feels like you're connected to so many big names that you just don't have to do this. And the names are bigger this time around than they were in 2018 for State. And that was the year, Gary Henderson had taken that team to Omaha. And Henderson was a lot more of a proven commodity. He had been relatively successful at Kentucky after Cohen left. He had a lot of experience. There was a push to hire him, but State stayed the course and ends up hiring Lemonis. We've talked to a couple of national guys. They all agree that the 2025 version of Chris Lemonis isn't going to get hired at Mississippi State. They're going to get one of these. It feels more and more like the name of this coach has already been mentioned because we've talked about big name guys. So for Parker, I struggle seeing him as I don't think he'll be the next head coach at Mississippi State. It's just going to be a question of who does State hire. If State hires Wes Johnson, Brian O'Connor, Butch Thompson, these are pitching coaches by trade. So it seems unlikely that at that point Justin Parker would remain at Mississippi State. If they hire a hitting coach, a guy who's more of a hitter's coach, then it's possible he could stay as assistant head coach and get a nice raise. But at the same time, he may do enough in these next few weeks that makes a program say, well, why don't we just go ahead and pluck him and make him our head coach if Mississippi State's not interested. Yeah. So if you made me guess, I don't think Justin Parker's back in Starkville next year. But that is just a guess. And at this time, though, I don't consider him a real candidate for this Mississippi State head coaching job.
Somebody's asking, what has Parker done differently than Lemonis would have done? And he's asking in the context of he doesn't think that a coaching change has affected things.
And that's a great question. And you watch them on the field, they are playing better, but I don't necessarily know that it's anything that Parker has done. Maybe his message in the locker room is a little different. I obviously can't speak to that. But all he's done is put the same lineups out there that Mississippi State has been putting out all the past few weeks, and he's the pitching rotations and the guys coming out of the bullpen hasn't been much different. I don't feel like he's making a ton of different decisions. He's not playing a different style of baseball by any stretch of the imagination. Maybe it's just what we talked about and what Parker mentioned, that mentally this team was kind of beaten down by the constant speculation that Chris Lemonis' job was in trouble. And once that was removed from the equation, they were free to play, with a little lighter heart. And they've taken that deep breath, and now they're like, okay, now all we have to worry about is playing baseball and trying to take this game as far as we can.
Morale does matter on the field. It absolutely does.
I think that's the thing I would point to. It's not necessarily, this isn't like, you fire your football coach and now you got somebody different calling plays and the plays look different and things like that. This is just baseball, man. There's not a lot of that at this point in the season, but definitely this team is playing better, and you have to give Parker credit for that.
Somebody's asking, how likely is it Parker gets retained by the new coach? Because there's a couple of young arms. If you're State, you don't want to lose.
You can't.
You
look
cannot.
At that, though. You can't. You cannot. Texas A&M right now is looking at the penalty for keeping a coach to try to keep your right. Mississippi State football is looking at the penalty for that right now. They kept Zach Arnett because we wanted to keep this signing class together, of which maybe 3 guys are still in here. You got to coach. You got to let your program be run by who you want to run it, not by the roster that you have. In this era, the roster you have might not be the roster you have tomorrow.
They might not even stay anyway.
Yeah.
Even
would I like to keep guys like Ben Davis and Ryan McPherson at Mississippi State? Absolutely, I would. They're talented pitchers, but you've got to hire the best coach you can and then let him run his roster, and then you'll be there with the NIL money. That's not going to be the issue. But you cannot just look at it from the perspective of, well, we want to keep these guys, so we got to do what we got to do to keep Parker on staff. You have to let the new coach run his staff.
and